Anxiety is rising, attention is collapsing, loneliness is spreading, and more people than ever feel overwhelmed by their own minds. At first, these seem like separate problems, but they may all be pointing to the same underlying cause. And if that's true, then solving that one cause could change far more than you realize. The version of me who started this journey wouldn't recognize who I've become today. I went from constantly doubting myself, to finally trusting my own decisions again. What once felt impossible became normal the moment I stopped limiting myself mentally. In this video, you'll discover the shift that made that transformation possible, and why it might be the missing piece behind your own anxiety, overthinking, and lack of direction. The mind's hidden battle. At first, it sounds like one of those phrases people throw around without really thinking about it. But if you've ever laid awake at night while your body was exhausted and your mind refused to stop, you already know exactly what it means. Because there are moments when it feels like your mind belongs to you, and then there are moments when it doesn't. You've probably experienced both. Maybe you're sitting alone after a long day, the room is quiet, the world has finally stopped asking things from you, but inside your head, everything is still moving. A conversation from this morning, a mistake from 3 years ago, an imaginary future that hasn't happened yet, a problem you can't solve, a decision you keep postponing, thought after thought after thought, no invitation, no permission, no off switch, and somewhere in the middle of all that noise, you realize something uncomfortable. The thing creating the chaos is the same thing you're relying on to build your future. Because your mind is a strange place, it's where your best ideas come from. The insight that changes everything, the strategy nobody else noticed, the creative spark that appears when the pieces suddenly connect. It's where intelligence lives, awareness, vision, possibility, but it's also where fear multiplies, where distractions sneak in, where impulses quietly take the driver's seat before you even realize they've grabbed the wheel. And that's the paradox. Your greatest strength, and your greatest vulnerability, occupy the exact same space. Most people spend their entire lives inside that conflict without ever recognizing it. They think they're making choices, but often, they're simply reacting to emotions, reacting to distractions, reacting to thoughts that appeared automatically, reacting to environments they never consciously chose. And the scary part? It feels normal. So normal that most people never question it. But every once in a while, something shifts. A small moment. Almost invisible, you suddenly notice a thought instead of becoming it. And for a split second, there's distance. You're no longer trapped inside the storm, you're watching it. And once you experience that, even briefly, you start seeing your own mind differently. Because maybe the goal was never to stop thinking. Maybe the goal was learning how to see your thoughts clearly. Watching your thoughts. Most people call it overthinking, as if the problem is simply having too many thoughts. But that's rarely what it feels like. Overthinking isn't really about quantity, it's about losing control of the filter. Thoughts arrive endlessly, one pulling you into the future, another dragging you into the past, one creating anxiety, another creating regret, one inventing problems, another replaying old ones, and before long, your mind feels less like a tool, and more like a crowded room where everyone is talking at the same time. You felt that before. Everyone has. But something fascinating happens when you stop automatically believing everything your mind produces. Instead of getting pulled into the thought, you pause, you look at it, almost the way a scientist examines something under a microscope. Why did that thought appear? Is it useful? Is it true? Why does it keep repeating itself? And suddenly, the thought loses some of its power, not because it disappeared, because you're finally seeing it. The thoughts are still there. The same mind is generating them. Nothing changed externally, but internally, everything changed. Now you're observing, evaluating, choosing, separating signal from noise, and in that space, clarity begins to emerge. Not perfect clarity, not instant clarity, the kind that slowly cuts through mental fog. The kind that helps you notice patterns hiding beneath the chaos. The kind that protects you from becoming a prisoner of every impulse that passes through your mind. And that's where the next realization appears. Mastering attention. A realization most people completely overlook. Your attention, not your intelligence, not your talent, not your motivation. Your attention. Think about today. Where did it go? How much of it belonged to you? And how much was taken? A notification, a headline, a comment, a message. A random thought, something pulled your attention away, then something else, and by the end of the day, your mind feels strangely exhausted even though you haven't physically done much at all. That's because attention is expensive. Every piece of information costs something. Every stimulus takes a small piece of your mental energy. Most people never notice this transaction happening, but your subconscious notices, every single time, because whatever repeatedly captures your attention slowly begins shaping your reality, your thoughts, your emotions, your beliefs, your decisions. The mind is always learning from what you repeatedly expose it to, always adapting, always absorbing, which means every time you hand your attention away carelessly, you're giving away something far more valuable than time. You're giving away influence over the person you're becoming. And once that realization lands, something changes. You become more selective. Not because you're trying to avoid the world. Because you finally understand the cost of letting the world constantly invade your mind. While everyone else is reacting, you begin choosing. While everyone else is being pulled, you begin directing. And that invisible shift creates an advantage most people never even realize exists. Escaping impulses. But then comes an even deeper challenge, one that's far more subtle, dopamine. Most people think it's pleasure, but you've probably noticed something strange. The excitement often comes before the reward, the anticipation, the expectation, the promise that something better is only one click away, one scroll away, one purchase away, one notification away, and so the chase continues, again, and again, and again. Tiny rewards, tiny hits, tiny distractions, slowly training the mind to crave immediate satisfaction, not because people are weak, because the system is designed that way, and most never notice it's happening, until one day they realize they've spent years following impulses they never consciously chose. The people who develop real cognitive control learn something different. They learn how to sit with discomfort, how to wait, how to delay gratification, how to resist immediate rewards in service of something larger. And strangely, the moment you stop obeying every impulse, you discover how much power those impulses had over you all along. Then comes silence, and for many people, silence is where things get uncomfortable, because when the noise disappears, there's nowhere left to hide, no entertainment, no distractions, no constant stimulation, just you, your thoughts, your emotions, your awareness. At first it can feel unsettling, like entering a room you've avoided for years. But if you stay there, something remarkable happens. The turbulence begins to settle, the mental dust slowly falls, the noise becomes quieter, and underneath everything, you discover a version of yourself that was there all along, grounded, present, aware, not because the world became less chaotic, because you stopped carrying all of that chaos inside you, the invisible edge. And eventually, that brings you to one of the most powerful forms of control a person can develop, strategic detachment. Because emotions are powerful, you felt anger, fear, jealousy, embarrassment, frustration, and in those moments, emotions can feel like commands, as if action must immediately follow feeling. But what if that's not true? What if emotions are information, not instructions? What if the feeling itself isn't the problem? What if the real power comes from deciding what deserves a response and what doesn't? That realization changes everything, because now you're no longer being controlled by every emotional wave that moves through you. You observe, you evaluate, you choose, and choice is where freedom begins. You see it in conflicts, relationships, money, stress, pressure. Moments that used to trigger automatic reactions suddenly become different. There's space, awareness, deliberation. Instead of being dragged by circumstances, you begin navigating them, and little by little, your internal world becomes stronger than your external environment. The transformation doesn't happen all at once. It happens quietly, day by day, usually through reflection. The moments nobody else sees. The questions you ask yourself when the day is over. What controlled me today? What didn't? Where did my attention go? Which thoughts served me? Which thoughts manipulated me? Which impulses won? Which ones didn't? Those small moments of honesty do something extraordinary. They train the subconscious. They weaken chaos. They strengthen awareness. And over time, the architecture of the mind itself begins to change. That's the deeper truth hidden beneath everything we've talked about. Cognitive control isn't simply discipline. It's design. It's building a mind that works for you instead of against you. Turning overthinking into awareness. Transforming attention into a strategic asset. Mastering dopamine instead of being mastered by it. Finding clarity in silence. Developing distance from emotional impulses. Piece by piece, layer by layer, until something remarkable happens. You stop operating on autopilot. You stop being controlled by every distraction, impulse, emotion, and circumstance around you. you begin operating from awareness. And once that happens, there's no going back. Because with awareness comes an uncomfortable realization. You begin seeing how much damage an uncontrolled mind can create. How many decisions were driven by impulse. How many mistakes came from reactivity. How many years disappear when attention is spent carelessly. That awareness can feel uncomfortable, even unsettling, but it's also liberating, because now you can see, and when you can see, you can choose. When you can choose, you can change, and when you can change, the mind becomes something it was always capable of becoming. Not a source of chaos, not a prison, not an enemy, but a powerful, strategic, deeply aware instrument. The most powerful tool you'll ever possess. And perhaps that's the real secret. The people who seem different, calmer, sharper, harder to manipulate, aren't necessarily smarter than everyone else. They've simply learned something most people never do. The mind was never meant to run unchecked. It was meant to be guided. And cognitive control is the invisible force that makes that possible. The invisible edge, the quiet advantage, the path toward true internal mastery. And if this video helped you see your own mind a little more clearly, subscribe. Because the next insight might be the one that changes everything.